So we are here with Matisyahu. He is coming to Alaska. This is your third time in Alaska, right?
That's right. I think it is, actually.
Yeah, I looked back on some old media from '07 and I think 2016, and you came up here then and you were very well received.
Yeah, I've always had a great time in Alaska. It's so special to be able to play music there. You know, what a special place. It's not the norm.
I was reading you back then. I don't know if you still do you still not perform on the Sabbath?
No, I actually do perform now. I'm not really so much of a Orthodox anymore, you know, for some years now. Yeah.
But that spirituality is still very present in your music. Your lyrics are just filled with it.
Yeah, the spirituality is something that's always been there, and I think will continue to be. But the form is not always staying the same, you know, with me.
Right. Yeah, that's the evolution spiritually. We should be going through some sort of process, right? It's not a static state of being.
Yeah, that's how I feel, at least. I don't know if everyone agrees.
But art's the same way. A lot of people like AC/DC's been putting out the same record for 50 years. But it's like, I'm not a big AC/DC fan, but some people love them. I like to see artists change over time. You know, I was listening, I'm a big fan I write poetry, I write songs, and I'm just a writer since my youth. So I was paying attention to your lyrics, and it seems you've got some recurring themes in your lyrics on this record in particular, like the word intention. Did you notice this? Was this conscious, or did you just happen?
No, now that you mention it, intention, I guess it is a word I know I use at least once. I guess I do use it more than once. In Hebrew, the word, in Hebrew, the word for intention is kavanah, and it's a really important word because it's like it's the intention that you put behind something,
right?
And that, you know, in our world sometimes doesn't always count. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But I guess in this more spiritual kind of like realms, like in the realms of thought and the realms of feeling, it actually does count quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of in a little bit in connection to what you were talking about in terms of just the opening about the Sabbath and all of that, it's I guess at some point I shifted into being less focused on the actual ins and outs and rules and being more focused on the intention. And I found as I did that the intention part kind of took over for me, I guess you could say. It became way more powerful to me and honest, actually.
Over the years, doing business, I have found that when I work with people, someone can make you a lot of money, but their intentions might not be pure. But someone else might cost you some money, but their intentions are pure. And I've often struggled with, when you're in business, you want to be good at business. You want to make money because that's why you're doing it. Success is measured in dollars. But success outside of business, I think, is more about those intentions. Like what was driving? What was their heart's desire? What are they trying to achieve? Even if they don't achieve it, I think I would rather achieve something the right way or not at all. But there's that cold, calculated side of everyone where we want, you could sit down and look at market research and say, what do I want to do with my next record based on market research? Or you could be the artist that you are and make, like this album in particular, I'm listening to it. You're talking about your children. You're talking about your process of life, the places you've been. It reminds me in Lonely Day, I was listening to that, and it seems like you're telling 3 different points in your life.
Correct. Yeah.
But you're saying these are lonely days, so it's like you're describing some pretty cool stuff, some engaging stuff. But then in retrospect, it makes me think that the rest of the record where you're talking about your kids and how important they are, and
it's interesting. Lonely Day was, I think, the first song that me and Salt Cathedral worked on together on the record at the house. And I think that, this period chapter of my life or whatever is about actually the end of the loneliness. And after, 25, 30, 35 years, starting with that moment when I kind of like the first moment when I felt different, because of this spiritual kind of feeling or calling, and I reference that in the song. I reference it. I think I reference it. I make a reference as a kid, that how I used to play alone, there's kids on the block and stuff, but I oftentimes found myself playing alone. And then, just those little references of what was going on in that time period, Star Wars and Vietnam War movies. And, that all had a big effect on me. It was like, I guess one of the first like moments that my sensitivity kind of like became apparent in a real way. And I was infatuated with weapons as a kid. My parents were kind of hippies. We lived in Berkeley, California at first. And I wasn't allowed to eat chocolate or play with any guns or watch any violence. And we came to see my dad's sister in Long Island. They left me there for like 3 days. And the first thing they did was put out a huge bowl of chocolates of those little, the little Crackle or the Good Bar or whatever, the yellow, the red. Oh my God. And they bought me a bunch of like toy guns. And when we moved back to New York, I lived in a kind of like the neighborhood I lived in was not very Jewish, pretty working class neighborhood. And all the boys in the neighborhood, we all played with weapons. We all played guns and military. And my dad built a clubhouse in the backyard that became the army base. And it was just weapons upon plastic guns and things you could use as weapons. And we would all find empty construction sites in the neighborhood and, pretend we were playing war. And I think at some point I must have been like maybe 8 years old or something. My parents had me sit down, they sat me down and they made me watch this movie called Letters Home from Vietnam. I don't know if you remember that, but it was like on HBO. I think it was like a series on HBO or something, but it told the story of these letters that men had written who had died in the war to their loved ones, and stories and real stories. And I went out after watching that and I tagged all the guns in there with price tags. And I walked around the street and I put up flyers all over the street that said weapons sale. And I stole all the weapons and I never played with guns again, as a kid. So I kind of like, my lyrics kind of like reference little things like that are important to me, and that next moment is like the first time that I took a hallucinogenic when I was like maybe 15 or something. And I remember going to the same place that we always went to and just everything like being completely cosmic and on a grid and, having meaning and the clarity, understanding and, everything just popping, in my brain. And to me, it wasn't a party. It was never a party. It was like, wow, God is real. Like, what is this? And then I remember like the next day just being like, our lives are, with the friends that I had done it with, our lives have changed. What do we do now? Do we like go join a monastery? Do we go on fish tour? What do we do? How do we, and everyone was just like, what the hell is wrong with you, bro? Like, I don't know what happened to you. Like, we had a nice time, but we're just like drinking 40s and smoking blunts now, like we were yesterday. And so that was like the second time when I, really felt like lonely in a way, and it's funny because the whole thing of God, and what that is all about, and God's love and all of that, and how that plays into loneliness and all of that. So, and then, I make a reference there to the back of the knot in the Torah. It says that when Moses was in a cave and he wanted to see God, he asked to see God's face, and God put him in the side of a cave and then passed by and he saw the back, so I also have like these little biblical kind of references and stuff in the songs that a lot of people might not even pick up on. Right. But it's kind of like all the learning that I did from those years in yeshiva and stuff. And then it's like that was a lonely day, like all this time that I was kind of fighting this and dealing with this feeling. And then I met my wife, it sounds so like, it's nothing, that crazy. It's our anniversary today. It's our 3-year anniversary today. Isn't that funny?
Congratulations.
Thank you. And we've been together 5 years. I met her and I just fell in love and we started our family. And COVID hit and I found myself surrounded by children. I have 6 kids. 5 of them, are with me, most of the time. 3 that are like teenagers now, and teenagers and babies, and 3 dogs, and my wife, and that whole thing of loneliness just kind of went away, and
Right.
even when I was married the first time and stuff, I was so on the road and so focused on my career and so isolated. Like, for example, with the religion and stuff, like I couldn't eat in the restaurants that my band and the promoters and everyone would go eat, and that sounds like, okay, yeah, I'm following these guidelines, and sitting in my hotel room by myself, eating when everyone's out there connecting to the culture, you know what I mean? And so there was a lot of loneliness during that time for me, and being away from my boys and my wife at the time, and just kind of being on this mission, which I'm sure you understand, and a lot of people too, when you become hyper focused on what you're doing. So yeah, so anyway, and the rest of the album, kind of like you said, it talks a lot about family and these personal connections and real things in my world, less about ideas and so forth.
Well, and I love the old stuff that you've done where it is more intellectual, but this new album is it is very personal, and that's beautiful. It's also very melodic. It's less wordy than your previous work.
Absolutely.
But the lyrics are still very poignant and still very, it's still your style, I can still see your wordplay and how you do things. It's still there, but it seems like maybe it's more refined.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I first started, you look at the early stuff like King Without a Crown and whatnot, and even now when I have to sing those songs, I'm like, wow, that's a lot of words, and it's one register, it's
Right.
all in that high kind of, and a lot of energy, and that's youth, that's the youth, that's punk rock. But as you get older, you start thinking like, okay, well, how do I make things more like, how do I connect in a different way? How do I learn how to make things more potent? Less is more. Right. And how to use your voice in different ways, use the wordplay in different ways, and then like you said, like refining it and actually going back and pulling things out, which as a young writer, I never did that. It was just
flow of consciousness.
Yes, and it still is now, but then there's this whole back process, taking things out, connecting things, connecting different bits, and then Salt Cathedral, the producers were really great at that. Working, not everyone is great at working with vocalists in that way.
Right.
Like some people, the vocalist is coming in with like the verse and the chorus and the verse and the chorus, and I'm coming in with like, 2 years of notes,
Right.
And I'm like, let's make an album.
Right.
And that's why everything is connected. Everything is interwoven. I'm very rarely coming in saying like, okay, I want to write this song about this thing.
Right.
It's more like, let's make a body of work and see where it all fits and what connects.
And that's another theme. Actually, this theme is throughout your work, but on this album, I noticed references to the pen, to the paper, to writing. You're talking about, like in the first verse of Lonely Day, you're talking about writing there. You're talking about the pen. So it really tells the listener that writing, like you just said, it's more like notes. You're keeping these notes as you're going. So you're capturing a real moment rather than a contrived, let's write this song about this or whatever.
Yeah. And I can tell you like where I was, like I remember different places where I was when I wrote different verses, and when I hear that verse, I'm like, oh, that was in Italy in that hotel room, or in London after that night, when I was sitting, warm glow of the light, like in Rain Dance,
Yeah.
The pen is my friend, like you said, in my mind, like there is this idea that at some point I always kind of come back to the pen and the music, and I'm that same like Matt Miller that was like on the train listening to Dre beats, on my Discman and just writing, about what I see and how do I make words sound cool together and how do I, all of that. Like, so yeah, I come back to that. You know what I mean? That's how I really like to write.
So were you writing before as a poet before you got into the music? Did the music come later, or was it always the same endeavor?
It's a good question. I think I did a little bit of writing like when I was a kid, but no, it was usually with the music, and I didn't really start writing when I was a young teenager. I started falling in love with music when I was like 14, 15. And like at 16, I started singing and realized that, wow, like I could do this reggae thing and like how it projected. Mm-hmm. And I still was just like enamored with music and what bands I was into, you know, and the culture that surrounded them. But not really writing yet so much. And then what changed? When I went out to Oregon, I was on this like wilderness treatment program, you know, type of thing for kids, you know, for sort of like wild kids or whatever. And we had to do a lot of journaling out there, and it was all in silence. You know, it was all like, there was no talking during the day unless you were talking to the therapist or someone like that. So we were walking in silence through the desert. I think it was during Passover, actually. And we had, the only place where we got to express really, you know, was in these journals. And that's when I started writing like song lyrics and stuff. And then when I had like my first band, I started writing. I started listening to instrumentals around that time and writing raps, basically.
That's cool.
And then I went to college. I came back and I went to college, and I went to the New School, to Eugene Lang, and they have a huge writing program there. And so I took all the poetry classes I could, because they didn't have like rapping classes, or I wasn't in the music program. I wasn't learning how to, you know, engineer or produce music, or even how to sing, even though I knew I could sing. And I took a lot of poetry classes. So all the assignments, all the homework assignments were writing assignments. And so that's what I did. I would just write that was like where I started developing the raps and stuff.
That's cool.
That's cool, man. No one's ever asked me, crazy. No one's really ever asked me about that question. I've never really thought about like when I actually started really putting the pen to paper and really expressing and feeling good about what I was writing. I mean, the first thing I wrote probably was Close My Eyes. That song, Close My Eyes, was one of the first things I ever wrote, you know, in college or whatever.
So the song that you obviously thought it was worth putting it first on the list, but the song Not Regular, it comes right out of the gate with this statement that really struck me, because it really resonates with me, because I was raised very religious, but I'm not religious. I was raised Baptist, but I'm when I was probably 16, 17, I went to a flea market, and there was all these books at this guy's stand. He had all these books, and I loved reading books like that were off limits. The thought of a book that I wasn't supposed to read made me seek it out. And so weird books of any kind, anything that's taboo or whatever, I was always very drawn to that as a youth. And I was a troubled youth. You know, I did a lot of drugs and all the stuff. So we have some common ground there. But I go to this flea market, and the old man, I still remember he had one of those talk boxes so he could talk. Sounded like a vocoder, you know,
yep.
Emphysema or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the shelves, and this blue set of 5 volumes called the Zohar.
Cool.
It jumps out at me, right? So I see this book, and I'm thinking, and I'm a book guy, right? And I have no idea what this is. I've never seen anything, and it has the red flames on the side. It was the Cincino Press version. The guy wanted $500 for it. We were talking about a teenage boy. I was like, I can't possibly pay you $500 for this. Why is it so much? That was my question. Why are these 5 books so expensive? And he looks at me and he says, he puts the thing up, he says, so what could you pay? And I only had $50 in my pocket. And I said, I've got $50. He says, sold. So I take these books that I'm fascinated with, because I have no idea what they are. at this point, I don't know that these are pivotal Jewish texts of Kabbalah.
Right.
I will come to discover that in years following, right?
Yeah.
And now that I know a little bit more about this tradition, I realize that was a special moment. The fact that I resonated with the Zohar in that way. And we're talking about it. I mean, there were thousands of books in this guy's flea market shop.
That's amazing.
Yeah. What are the chances that I would be drawn to it? And now to this day, I've been studying the Kabbalah and mysticism and comparative religion since I was, before I was 20. I'm coming up on 44 years old. And I'm just now in the last couple of years, really starting to grasp what it is.
Yeah, sure.
It takes so long.
Yeah.
But once you get it, it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. It
can be. There's a lot of beauty in there. There's a lot of crazy stuff in there too. But yeah, there's some main concept in there that's really, really, really cool, Yeah.
Does it come through in your music?
Oh, absolutely. It has for years. I mean, kind of like you're saying, it resonated with me when I first started learning it. I was like, oh yeah, this resonates with me so strongly because these ideas are comfortable to me. And so yeah, I explored it, and then I had a teacher for years that also helped me with a lot of my writing, and we were really comparing in depth Kabbalah with Hasidus and different types of Hasidus from different eras and different places. So yeah, it kind of definitely is definitely a backbone and one of the backbones in my writing and in what I write, for sure. I
love it. And maybe that's why when I hear this music that you make, I hear the positive lyrical content. And that's something like when I wrote, when I was writing my music back when I recorded and did the whole band thing, I found that writing positive lyrics could kind of, it wasn't the norm. Most of popular music is not really that positive. Sometimes it is, but I think that that's something that I've gained over the years from studying the Bible outside of religion.
Sure.
For me, it's very personal. It's not so much about a community, right?
Right.
But I was raised in that community vibe where, we went to church 3 times a week. Everyone I knew was a Baptist. I knew a Catholic kid, and he was the odd man out. And, but I think that's what I like about the Kabbalah and those ideas, is that it really kind of transcends the religious part of it. It's something universal. And it makes, of course, I start thinking, okay, so music, you've got 12 notes. I'm thinking of gematria and how can we do the math to figure out what note evokes what emotion? Is it relative? Is it contextual? And I mean, is there anything like that you've come across in your study?
There is. There's a lot of people that mess around with that. And I've seen a few things that talk about Kabbalah and music. I can't think offhand of who exactly. There's a guy that I used to talk to a lot about it named Asher Crisp. He talks about it, and I think one of his first teachers, he deals with a lot of Kabbalah, but one of his first teachers as well, Rabbi Ginsburg. Have you ever read any of Rabbi Ginsburg? No. He's a Kabbalist as well, from Israel, who writes a lot about music and stuff. They do a lot of talks. I wonder if any of them have gone up to Alaska. Interesting.
That would be interesting to see. So about the first thing I was exposed to from this new record was the America lyric video.
America. I was on track to my destination. Switch cross track from my meditation. Burn negative like radiation. Slave to the ways of an empty nation. America, give me the words to speak.
I found it interesting. You've got this lyric video coming out, and the letter E is missing.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, that's like a play on the Hebrew. Like if you take in, like, as you know, in Kabbalah, there's a lot of gematria and a lot of letters corresponding to numbers, right, and play back and forth between the numbers and the signs and the symbols and what represents what. And then there's also a lot of like play with the letters and even phonically the way words sound, because the translation from Hebrew to English is not accurate no matter what. It's just spelled however. You can write anything how you want. There's no. So if you look at the word, America, and I was playing with it, as I'm singing America, and I'm thinking like what other words are sounding like rolling off the tongue, sounding similar, like a miracle, America is a miracle, America is a miracle. And then as I'm thinking, I'm the Hebrew, and something I remember someone once pointing out, like Amrika, and in Hebrew is an empty nation. And I thought that was interesting because America is this dichotomy of the miraculous and cruelty as well, and hypocrisy and, greed, and then all of these wonderful things. And so I thought it was cool to do a play, on the word America, because the concept is pretty much similar, I think.
Yeah, that's cool. So Amrika translates as empty nation.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Is nation, and Reka is empty. Yeah,
that's fascinating. What does Matisyahu mean in Hebrew?
Matisyahu, well, he was the character from the story of Hanukkah.
Okay.
He was the father of the Maccabees. Okay. My youngest son, his name is Judah Mac. Matisyahu had the Judah Maccabee, the hammer, and they were the army that like fought the Assyrian at the time. Was the Assyrian power when they came against Jerusalem and miraculously defeated them. The story of Hanukkah. The oil lasted for 8 nights, so that's the name. Matisyahu comes from there. But it's the Hebrew translation of the name Matthew. My name is Matthew in English.
Okay.
And Matthew. So when I went to Hebrew school, and they were asking the Hebrew name, sometimes your Hebrew name is not your translation of your English name. You may have been given a Hebrew name, but we just went with Matisyahu, which is the Hebrew. And then in the Ashkenaz pronunciation, the t is pronounced with the sa.
I was going to ask, because I looked up Hebrew and it had the 2 tavs.
Yeah.
And I was expecting a shin.
Yeah, the circles that I was hanging out in are Eastern European and Russian, and they pronounce the t with a sa. But it's actually spelled, with the t's, not with the shin.
Okay.
2 t's, like Matt.
I'm trying to learn Hebrew lately so that it will help me with my Kabbalistic studies, and it's amazing. It's a fascinating language. It really, all of those intricacies of it really do seem to strongly suggest a spiritual origin, because the idea that all of these things could literally add up to each other, and to show that it's just very hard to think that anyone or any group of people could have fabricated such a thing. It had to have come from some greater source.
Yeah, it's deep stuff, man. They've gone in a lot of time, a lot of hours. There wasn't much else that a lot of these people were doing. They didn't spend a lot of time, with a lot of the things that other people do today. They're like learning and learning and learning. My man, I gotta go. My wife is ready for me. She's at the farmer's market.
Well, maybe we'll meet when you're here. I'll be at the show.
Are you coming to the show?
Absolutely. Yeah, and our station is sponsoring, so I'll be glad to maybe come backstage and shake your hand.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
I would love it. Yeah, I'll see you there. I'm excited.
All right.
Excited.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for all this beautiful artistic energy you've just shared with us. So
You've got it. Thank you, and thanks for your questions. They were great.
See you next time.
Take care.